timing. Hi. So welcome everyone to Taking Back Birth with me, your host, Kristen Nagle. We're on Children's Health Defense Canada. And it's been, I guess, 4 weeks since the last show I was on, since the birth of Adley. And so I thought I'd come back and bring on a few mamas that also have had experience with traditional birth attendants or birthing outside the system. We all have our babies. We all have our kiddos with us. This is like typical, like going to be mom hour. If we even make it that long, we'll see how the show goes. But I'm just going to start beside me, which is this way on my screen. I don't know which way I'm pointing on others. But Victoria, you're kind of this way. I'll go around in a circle. If you want to introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Hi. So you're going my way, Kristen?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Victoria Nicholas, and I've been a birth and postpartum doula, as well as working in the funeral services for about 10 years. And I birthed my first son outside the system with Billy Harrigan, and then I just gave birth to my second son, Finn. It ended up being a free birth, but that was not planned. So yeah, that's just a bit about me.
Okay. And then Kim, do you want to go next? I muted you, but I'm unmuting you. There you go.
Yes, sorry, I forgot the question though. I'm sorry.
Just a quick introduction of who you are, and then we'll kind of get into.
Okay. Yes. I had 3 kids naturally birthed. One of them at the hospital, and 2 at home. And then I was pregnant with my daughter Audrey here, and midwives wanted me to wear a mask in my own home, and I wasn't allowed to have a tub birth. And I said, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna do this on my own. So I contacted Billy, and then I had a home birth with her, and a huge change from midwives, massive change. So just my eyes have been open. I know there's lots of babies. My eyes have been opened up a lot. I know, sweet.
And then Amanda, we'll head over to you. And then Kim, I'm coming back to the tub birth thing after.
Yes. Hi, I'm Amanda. I have 4 kids. 3 of them were born at home with a midwife, who was my sister-in-law. And then the 4th one I had this past July with Billy, actually. Mm-hmm. I'm a nurse, and I just decided that I wanted to do something a little bit different this time. I didn't like the rules. So I wanted to try something a little bit different because I'd already had 3 natural births. I figured, why not try a 4th without anybody except a birth attendant?
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting. I'll get back. Well, we'll tie in Victoria's story with yours, but Amanda, you basically had a free birth as well, unplanned, just like Victoria. But it's kind of basically what happened. And I want to hear obviously both those stories. But Kim, I want to come back just before I forget. Why were you not allowed a tub bath or tub birth? Sorry.
Because of the contamination of COVID in the water. Oh, I know. Did you just hit your head? So when I was not happy about having to wear a mask in my own home, and them making my husband wear a mask in my own home, we said, well, that is ridiculous. Where is the evidence? It's our own germs, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, well, we can't have a tub birth either because there would be contaminants of our mouth if we weren't wearing a mask in the water, which could harm the baby. So I didn't, from that point, my level of respect for them and all the knowledge that I thought they had and their accreditation just kind of went down the tube because it just, none of it made any sense. People were making up the rules as they went, and I didn't feel safe anymore with them. So
no. I just have to laugh. And I think it's important to point out. So myself, Amanda, Kim are all RNs that have been terminated or let go for different reasons, or just not at work at this time. And I think it's interesting, from having, medical background and probably the things that we thought we believed, just the 180 coming around. But I do think it's interesting, Amanda, yourself, you always knew, like you never, like all your kids were born at home. So, so how did that come to be, like, as a nurse, like what made you feel, that was the right thing to do?
I was in nursing school when I had my first daughter. So like I was still kind of a little bit well, no, actually that's a lie. I had just graduated from nursing school when I had my first daughter, and I had a lot of questions and I wondered why I had taken the job that I did, because I realized I probably didn't fit the typical nurse vibe. And I have a really great sister-in-law who is a midwife, and we actually graduated around the same time. And I thought, why not try this at home? I had no desire to go to the hospital, so I had a great team of people to help me. Like my husband is an awesome support. My sister-in-law was an awesome support. I had another sister-in-law who was a doula. So for the 3 births that I had at home with in the system, I had with my both my sister-in-laws. So like it was amazing. Um, but then the closer I got to seeing how things were happening with COVID, like we were still in the mask stuff when I was pregnant with my fourth, and I had made it very clear that I was not going to comply with a lot of those things. So instead of embarrassing my sister-in-law and causing problems and not attending appointments, I thought, like, why not just do this a different way? And I'm very thankful that I did a different way. Like, I wouldn't say this was my redeeming birth, but it definitely was a birth where everything happened on my own terms, and there was nothing that I could say bad about it. None of my births really I could say bad about any of them, but it was just nice to not have to worry about, if I say no to this, what's going to be my consequences. I was able to say no and not have to think twice about it, having Billy as my TBA. Yeah.
Mhm. It is amazing, like the language, right? That we've kind of like accepted, like, oh, they allowed me to do that, or
Yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
what are the consequences if I choose to do something differently,
Yeah.
versus like this is what I'm hoping for, and
Yes.
then be supported in that, and let's see how it goes. How can I be supported in these decisions that I want? But it's like, will I be allowed? And if I, say no, like what's the consequences? I'll be a bad girl, and what are they going to do? And
Mm-hmm.
especially now in this era, like we've moved into like so much more of like worrying about CSA and things being called, and it's crazy. Victoria, I'm just getting to know you, and I'm so glad that we've are connected now, so I can continue to learn more from you. But you've been in the birthing world for a bit now, right? Like, because I think you
Yeah,
work. Are you a doula? And
I was a doula for 10 years, and I was
okay,
only supporting women in the system. I wasn't doing any outside births as a doula.
okay.
Mm.
Yeah.
So then, what changed for you then? Where was the change for you
Well,
if you were only in the hospital?
You know what? Honestly, I was building my doula practice at coincidingly working in funeral services. So I was pretty ingrained in the systems essentially. And really,
Mm.
the women that I was attracting at the time to support as their doula were choosing to birth in the system. And I was still buying into this whole certification. At one point, benefits were covering me. So, in order to be a part of the doula association, you weren't allowed to be attending outside births. But deep inside myself, I knew that that never was aligned with who I was. I had had a previous experience in my life where I said no and understood what that meant, taking that sovereignty into my own hands way before my birth. So when I got pregnant with my son, it was a no-brainer to birth outside the system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I, and I had worked alongside nurses and midwives and OBs for 10 years before I had my son. So it just didn't feel aligned, for me
Mm-hmm.
to birth in the system, my first birth. And my son was born April 20th of 2020. So like I was,
Yeah.
my husband and I spent like 2 weeks buying into like what we wiped down our groceries, and then after that we were like,
Yeah.
we spent the whole first year with our son. I actually did have to go into the system. My son was severely tongue tied, and I fought for 4 months trying to get someone to access care to have my son released, because people were only taking mothers and babies on Thursdays or from 3 to 5, or like it was so ridiculous. My son was not thriving. And it was bad. So that was a really big struggle to get. And, they wanted me wearing masks. So I was seeing LCs and it was just insanity. Yeah, it was crazy.
It was crazy. So
Yeah.
it's interesting you had 10 years of experience of, that's similar to myself of like 12 years NICU nurse, like just seeing like all this stuff for the first bit. I definitely, for the least of 7 years, I bought into it. And, there was a point, yeah, absolutely. I was like, home birth should be illegal. They're dangerous. Like, we have to fix all the problems. So I was definitely on the other side of it. And then over the last like 3 years, especially this last bit, did a complete 180 in everything, especially when you started unlearning everything else. So when you were in there for like 10 years, like, were you affected by that? Because I know a lot of doulas get really burnt out when they don't align and they're seeing all this happen.
I was really lucky. I had grown up in a very narcissistic home. And so this is no offense to the medical system, but being at the hospital felt like I was like surrounded by, the doctors, that very narcissistic energy. So I kind of knew how to play it, support my clients. And I also was doing a lot of self-counseling. I had a really great counselor at the time, which I did a lot of work leaving what wasn't mine at the door and did a lot of grounding and energy work to show up for them in the system. But because I'd grown up in a narcissistic home, being in the hospital was like, oh, I know how to play these games, because it's a lot of games in there. I mean, I'm sure you can attest to that as nurses. There's a lot of energy and a lot of dynamics happening between relationships. And so I was really grounded, but after I had my son and COVID happened, and made it for me. I wasn't planning on maybe going back and just working at the system, but then with all the mandates and the things they required for you to go in the hospital, I was like, I'm not practicing, the way I used to, and I'm not going into the hospital anymore with families. But it was outraging. I mean, I wasn't like Billy. Like Billy immediately was like, no, I am changing this. Whereas for me, I did dally for 10 years, I guess, because families really, they wanted support and they wanted to access this information inside them, but they weren't willing to leave the hospital and that kind of structure,
Yes. Which is why I wanted to have these conversations, because I think it's really important to share, just to show that there are other options, and to get rid of that stigma that, like, oh, you're so brave for being at home. I was on a call yesterday and they turned it around and they said, oh, you're so brave for going into the hospital. So I would love to see like that shift, just because like I just fully like unlearned everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this was, I felt robbed with my first two sons, fully medicalized, epidural, like just inductions, the full works. And when I started to learn more about actual physiological birth and what that looks like, I felt robbed of an experience. And so for me, like Adley was like, I got to experience what I felt was taken away from me, because that information is just not out there. Like we are just so programmed to think it has to be one way. So I think it's interesting that we all had Billy Harrigan as well at our births at different points. So I think that's pretty incredible. Kim, I know you're probably on a tighter schedule of, well, we all don't know how long we're going to last, but you mentioned you had one hospital birth and then you had Billy for a home birth. And I don't know did something happen at the hospital that kind of, oh, you said 2020 came. I don't know if you want to share your experience of what it was like to work with a TBA.
Yeah, it's just good. Just to go back, my first was I was still the destruction. Oh, sweetie, what do you need? Yes, I'm not sure, my love. I had my son in the hospital. I had the stretch and sweep and my water broke and everything. And to me, it was a decent birth. I still had him naturally. But then I didn't want to do it in the hospital anymore because I didn't want all those interventions. But still, the consecutive birth after that was a tough birth, but there was still. Sorry. Okay. Listen, look at the baby and look at the little baby. Okay. My second birth was a home birth, a tub birth. It was mostly pleasant, nothing really too bad about it. And my third, I actually felt bad for the people around me and I ended up taking Gravol because I thought usually my births are like 4 hours max, and this was 9 hours. I was having contractions every 7 minutes for about 9 hours, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And later talking with Billy, it was just a position change. I kept walking around the hospital or my home, kept going. And by 2 a.m., the midwife said, okay, I think you need a break. And my husband was so tired, and I knew that I shouldn't have taken any Gravol, but I felt bad. See, it sounds so stupid, but I ended up taking Gravol, and then I was laying in the bed knowing that I was still having these contractions, and I never fell asleep from the Gravol. So then I ended up having a bit of a tub birth, and my contractions slowed down to every 15 minutes, and then they got worried. The baby's heart rate dropped to 80, so they said, you need to get out and push. So I was in the side of the tub pushing, which I didn't ever want to do. And he came out, but that was a hard pushing. I've never had to push because I just had the reflex. And pushing really does a lot to your pelvic floor. It damaged me a lot. I recovered, but so that birth was a little bit more traumatic. And because of the Gravol, I didn't really get to enjoy that first day with my baby. I hardly remember it because I had so much in my system. Anyways, and then, yes, I got pregnant with Audrey, and I refused to be with the midwives, and they knew when I was going to be 20 weeks pregnant. And someone called CSA on me for refusing to get an ultrasound. So I called Billy in hysterics, and she said there's CSA, is that what they're called?
CAS. Yeah.
CS, sorry.
Yeah.
They're not even legally allowed to do that. You can hold them criminally responsible because, anyways, the rights of a baby in utero, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little tricky, dicey there, but my birth with Billy was wonderful. I went to her house, I think once or twice for a checkup, and she just listened to any concerns I had. And because it was my fourth, I sort of knew what to expect. And it was a completely different atmosphere. She didn't come in with this giant duffel bag of things and say, okay, you need to clear the table so we can have a resuscitation area. She was, I think she spoke 4 words the entire time I was in labor. She was only here about half an hour. And she had a bit of I think she was dealing with a new mom who didn't know they had to breastfeed on demand, sort of whenever the baby wakes up, breastfeed. And it was a new mom that had their baby and family was around. And so the baby wasn't being as fed as often. And she just said, I'm just going to deal with that. I know, sweetie. She was very calm. I don't know if Billy, I know Billy can get angry because that's where that fierceness comes from, but she does so well in stress. And I can't even imagine her in an actual traumatic experience or episode. She has something in her that I can't even describe. The way that she handles herself and projects herself is amazing. I wish I could put that in a bottle and revisit it in times that I'm low because she's just amazing.
Yeah, there's probably not enough nice things to say, just the energy that's in there.
Yes.
Victoria, so you had Billy at your first birth, and then, I think you're hoping again, but it just didn't work out for Finn.
Well, you know what? Well, Kristen, she was to attend you.
I know.
I mean, well, she said no to me. She's
Yes.
like, no. And her husband had passed. And I'd asked her even to come on my podcast, and she was taking a step back, but it wasn't meant to be. She was definitely to be with your family. And we moved from KW up to the Kawarthas. So I don't think she really wanted to travel either. And so, we had Jen. Who's like her sister part, but Jen didn't even make it. So it ended up being a free birth.
Do you, you started a podcast, the Noble Mother. And that's your first son's name, right? Noble?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, how fitting. That's such a beautiful podcast name.
Thank you.
And so you were able to kind of like document your pregnancy, and that's when I found you. So I don't know how long you've been doing your podcast, but I know you were kind of just sharing your pregnancy, and then how we really found you was sharing Finn's birth and what happened there. So I don't know if you want to, how much you want to get into that, or if you want to just direct people to your podcast, or kind of share tidbits.
What do you think is relevant to share?
Well, I think
what did you want to capture?
I want to kind of explain, like, if anybody here would like to answer best. Like, people always ask me, and what's a traditional birth attendant? Is that like a doula? What is that, right? And so I kind of answer, it's what a midwife should have been before they were indoctrinated by the medical system. So it's like a traditional midwife, before, liabilities and all the medical system took over. But I'm curious if, since we all, experience a traditional birth attendant birth, if there's another way you guys would describe that.
I think Billy is a bit unique though, right? Because she's a grandma, right? Like, so it's hard to know what another traditional birth attendant would be like, because like I had some of Billy's students at my birth who haven't branched out on their own quite yet, but like Billy was definitely a grandmotherly role, right? Even though she's not the age of my grandmother, she had like a motherly, grandmotherly role, and she was so good at that. Like, she's very nurturing, and she just knew when to not say something and knew when to say something, and I appreciated that about her. But I don't know if it would be different with a younger TBA, if they would have that same type of role. So that would be interesting to know what people thought of someone who had that role but were younger than what Billy is.
Well, I mean, I guess, Kristen, you're sort of stepping into that new phase with Billy. But I mean, I had Jen, who's trained with Billy for 7 years. And they just have like a core value to them. Like, I think they're just like, there's a value system in them. Like, they've had many children. So there's a lot of wisdom with mothering more than 5 or 6 children. And then a lot of trust in their faith and their ability and their skills, which I think is really beautiful. I think when you bring those two things in, like, that's a really potent person to have with such beautiful skills.
And they are not afraid, and they know they're right by the experiences that they see. They don't have to be convinced that they're right about how they approach things. They hear the feedback of mothers, and they look at the wisdom of generations and how we are all mammals, and we all had births naturally to begin with. They just encompass sort of they're fearless. They don't double like it's what they do seems to be more instinctual and more holistic and more sort of attained to the human experience. There's not needing all the interventions aren't required, aren't needed, and you can see that how they work, how that's just, although the belief systems with the medical indoctrination, they don't even reflect on that to show that they are confident in how they're attending your birth, if any of that makes sense. Like, they don't need to be convinced that they are right by I can't even get my train of thought.
Surveys or like through.
Yeah, they just have you guys just have the confidence that you know what you've learned is how it should be.
Yeah.
And I think that, goes back to, our ancient inner wisdom, wise women. And I think, that's been taken away from us over, decades, centuries, for a long time, because women are meant to, connect and share and support each other. And we were the healers and the nurturers, and we had these skills and we passed them down, and we had, through stories or experiences, and, we mentored and we did all these things. So we'd have those intuitive skills that you spoke of, Kim, like that knowing, that confidence, and this is how it is. And that's all been, taken away from us. So again, that's why I think, coming together and having, women share their stories is passing back down that wisdom and bringing it back, and trying to get back to that point of where women share their knowledge and experiences. Victoria, it looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and mother-centered. Like, I mean, there's something like women and mothers know, there's an innate knowing. So like working off of that it's like there's a curiosity that TBAs bring, that Billy and I think people that are working in that traditional way, there's a curiosity, and there is a really allowing the mother to journey what it is they need to journey. Because really the wisdom is in the mother in so many capacities. They bring really great skills. You bring great skills, but it's very mother-centered, which is the way it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, creating this environment and atmosphere where, the woman is in control, the mother's in control, she knows best, and you are supporting in her knowing in her body and what to do. And Amanda, you said something else where like they said the right things and knew what to say at the right time. And I think that goes back to, just allowing the mother to be in this place and respecting that. And I'm going to mute in a second. But Victoria, I wanted to come back to you because you said something very interesting in your podcast, which was you didn't want to be alone. Sorry, you didn't want to be alone. You wanted to have women with you. And I don't know if you want to kind of share that experience of, you did birth on your own, but what you actually wanted.
Yeah, I know, it was interesting. So like I am, like I can be pretty not wooey, but I love the spiritual side of things. So I decided that I was going to have a traditional birth attendant, which was Jen, and what's called a radical birth keeper. And if you go to my podcast, you'll kind of hear the scenario of how this is. But the radical birth keepers are training under Yolanda, and traditional birth companions are training with Billy Harrigan. And so, needless to say, we invested in both of these women, and Jen showed up with her heart in her hands. Even though I had given birth to Finn, he came quickly. And Taylor never did. And then there was a lot of abuse that had ensued after with her, a lot of the word radical and why I wasn't wanting to take radical responsibility for things. And she started then coming into my marriage saying how my husband didn't hold the right space. And my son was born during bedtime, which all of you are mothers here on the call, so you can attest to bedtime. My husband was doing bedtime, setting up a birth pool. We put on the leafscape for my son. We have a big family bed. Anyways, the birth keeper was a very different tone. It was very judgmental, but I did want all my sisters there. Like I really, I had really invested in having Jen and Taylor be there, and especially for my husband as well. Like we don't claim to be free birthers. Like I love investing in support and having that wisdom surround me and that love, whether it's painful or not. I believe in it. I love it. And so, anyways, that was an interesting scenario to
Can
work
I ask
through
you a question about that, Victoria?
Yeah.
With the
sure.
radical birth keeper. How do you feel about, like, hopefully this is not going to cause any issues. I'm going to say it anyway. How do you feel about the radical birth keepers saying that they're the TBA role? Like, how does that?
Actually, I don't think radical birth keepers come with skills. That's what I'm going to say. I think traditional birth attendants and traditional birth companions come with skills. And from my experience, after even putting out my podcast episode, I had many women reach out to me that had been that had their money taken and were told and promised something by a radical birth keeper, and they never showed. And they don't come with skills, and they come with a lot of judgment. Not all of them, I shouldn't say, but that's been the experience and sort of what I'm hearing. I mean, everyone, you know, there are women that love their nurses and their OBs. There are women that love their midwives. So, I mean, everyone has their own unique experience as a human being. But as the one thing, and, you know, Jen is who's Billy was her mentor. She said something really like profound. She's like, you know, we show up and we bring to the family like skills and what they need in that moment. You know, we don't show up with judgment. And it's not the time to be talking to people about being radical in some respects. I believe in taking sovereignty in your own experiences and moving through, like Kristen, like your daughter really had you come to your knees. Like it was a come to God moment. Like there is no denying that. I get goosebumps thinking about it. Like there was so much moving through you to bring her here. And like that doesn't need judgment. Like, you know, that just requires love and care and support and tending. And but also you did it. Like you walked the portal. You walked it.
I think the judgment thing is very important in knowing who's going to be in your space and what that's going to feel like and look like for you, because that takes you out of, you know, the work you're doing and out of your body, and you're distracted. And Kim, I think that was your experience with the midwife, right? Of like, you know, couldn't tub birth and this, and that was why you chose not to do it. I think creating an atmosphere, an environment where you feel loved, where you feel supported, where there is no judgment, where you are allowed to be in your body, but you're not alone in doing it. There's something very beautiful and important in that process. Like,
but there's so much vulnerability too, right? Like there's never going to be a time where you'll be any more vulnerable to any other human being, right? Like you're literally on your knees begging for it to be over in some cases, right? Naked. Yeah, exactly. Naked and possibly around strangers. Like it's the most humbling, but the most empowering thing at the same time, which is so crazy to think that it can be both of those things, right?
One of my girlfriends that was at my birth, she was a doula for many years and is now, you know, she's actually in the TBA course with me. She's trying to work outside of the system in the TBA role. And so she was at my birth with me, and she wrote me after, and she's reflected. And one of the lines she said was, you're at your most vulnerable, but at the same time, the most powerful. And it's amazing how you can have those two components side by side, where you can be that vulnerable, but also like so powerful and so strong.
And it's crazy where does that come from in that moment? Is it the slight encouragement that you get from Billy? Is the words that she said, or is it your own self-talk? Is it the environment? Is it your husband giving you encouragement? What is that? Or is that just your innate way? Either way, it happens. It's just the baby is born, and
it's all a circle.
And you did it.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there's break down some of the fears. We'll kind of, you know, I know everyone has their babes, and we won't talk too long, but I think bringing us together, it's like, okay, well, what are some of the fears people have? Pain. I don't know if anybody wants to touch on that one first, like, you know, what you experienced and how you got through it, what that was like for you.
I know with my first, when I was told to call, you know, whatever the rule was, to call the midwife.
511.
Yeah, I called at that moment, and she said, "Well, it's a little early." And I just sort of, at that time, I had already taken the role of, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to birth at home, or I'm going to labor at home as much as I can for my first birth. And then I got to the hospital, and you know, whatever happened there. But the pain, you sort of, I know that I go extremely quiet. I go within, I have a focal point, and I don't clench. I let my shoulders drop. The fear of being in pain doesn't really exist within those moments, because they come, you can't, they're on top of each other. All you can do is prepare, just relax, breathe. The anticipation for all of that, especially with your firstborn, can be quite scary. I can't even really recall how I felt anticipating my first birth. I think I was more concerned about how everybody's perception was of that pain. You want to do it naturally? Yes, I would. Wow, that's crazy, that all of that. But again, you had to kind of find the strength within yourself to just know that you could do it. And when you finally actually feel those first bit of labor pains, and then they get more and more intense, but you had already conquered the contraction previous to that, you got a little bit of confidence each time you had another contraction. And then by the point that you realize, well, I can't do anything about it, there's no epidural coming, it is what it is, you just release your body. You come up with whatever mantra, whatever. I imagine myself just opening up, and the waves came, and I just, okay, it's coming. The baby's coming. I'm going to have the baby soon. It's the perception of other people's judgment. I guess that seems to be an ongoing feature here. Is probably the worst part. We are more capable than what we know. You have to not care what other people think. And it's really not that bad. I said I would, I don't do well in my pregnancies. I don't have very great pregnancies. I had the symphysis pubis dysfunction. I was on crutches. It was really terrible. Anyways, but I would much rather just birth my baby because the whole pregnancy experience wasn't great. But yeah, if anybody wants me to just birth their baby, no problem. It's not that bad of an experience for me at home, right? At the hospital would be, different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know, Kristen, I feel like you could talk differently about it after you just came out of your birth.
Yeah, I was in this mindset of, okay, yes, there's pain, but I was like, Ina May says, it's an interesting sensation that requires all of your concentration. And then, like reading about all these like ecstatic births, and, they can be orgasmic and you can be pain-free. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get myself in this mindset and this, create this environment, this atmosphere. I was like, okay, I can do this. I've done hard things. And I think that was an important lesson for me to have to experience with the back labor. Was something else that
that's excruciating. That's the meanest thing ever.
I've never had back labor, so maybe I retract what I said, but
no, don't retract. No, absolutely don't
It's
retract. It's perfect. It's like all
another realm of pain. Like it's awful. Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Do you think it was connected to any emotional component, like any trauma or anything that had happened over the past few years for you, Kristen? Like, do you think it was something holding in your body, or do you think it was just the experience?
I don't know, because when I think about it, Liam, my second, I ended up getting an epidural. But when I think back, I think that was back labor too. But I got the epidural before I really endured it. So I don't know. There's lots of things. I don't know if it's just the way my body is. If I needed more chiro, pelvic floor or something. Someone mentioned from nursing, all those long hours on your feet or positioning. Who knows? But I am very, humbled by the experience. I can't believe I've heard of people, that have gone multiple days with back labor. But with that being said, I remember thinking each one, Kim, and you kind of made a point, I was like, oh my gosh, if this one is that bad, what is it going to be like at the next one? And Christina, who was with me, she said, just concentrate on each one. Just concentrate on this one. Focus on this one. Don't think ahead, because then you'll get out of that state and you will panic, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and then you will not be able to concentrate. But I remember when I finally did lay down on my side, which for whatever reason that seemed to work for me. I think that was the Illuminati. I always pronounce it wrong, but I think, Victoria, did I say that right? Do you
Illuminati?
know?
Yeah. Like just the
yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's like that phase of where the endorphins kick in, the natural endorphins, your natural painkillers in your body. Kind of get in this out of body or this trance, experience where even though I was in so much pain, somehow I still managed to have 90-second sleeps, naps.
Mhm.
And then Kim, I was doing the same thing as you. I was like, okay, this is like incredibly painful, but I'm just like visualizing the opening up. Baby's coming. We're going to meet you. And I think everyone has to have their different points to what they concentrate their energy on. I saw dynamic doulas there in London. They said hold a comb in your hand, so like the teeth are in your palm to squeeze.
Right.
And I was like, oh yeah, that would have been good. I was holding onto the leg of a kitchen chair, and I would just hold that and squeeze it, or like bang it up and down if it was really bad. But that's kind of how I channeled. But with that being said, the pain, I would absolutely do it again, because I think we can all attest to how amazing it is that when you do birth your baby, it's over. It is just gone. And you're just flooded with the most amount of oxytocin, all these hormones you'll ever experience in your life. And just that rush of like, oh my God, like we just did that. Like I looked at baby girl and I was like, we just did that. Like, and it's over instantly. And you're just like, holy, like that, that rush of, climbing a mountain summit, or, if you're doing a long race, whatever kind of crazy strenuous activity you're doing, when you accomplish it, it's like, holy shit, like we just did that. And all the pain, all the everything goes away. And I was like, what an amazing creation, because that's how people are able to have more kids.
Yeah.
I remembered my last birth, and I was just like, I did it. And like, you're just saying it like over and over again, like you passed like the very end, right? Like you're made it to that last contraction, when like literally 5 minutes before you're like, this is the last one, I can't do it anymore. And you're like, you're freaking out, right? But yeah, it is honestly the best flood of oxytocin at the very end.
Yeah.
It's so awesome.
And you all would have been witnessing like so many women being so fearful of birth. So like that would have been in your psyches as well. So like, whereas for me, like I was more attracting women that really did trust in their ability in a lot of ways. That's why I think they were looking for some support. So I got like the other end so like you really unconditioned yourself to have beautiful births, because what you were witnessing over and over again in your space was constant fear, really. And you chose something else.
And I think that's huge, right? It's
So
moving away from that
you.
fear.
Yeah.
Into that, we talked about it, Kim, when we're talking about the TBAs, of that inner knowing, that confidence, and moving away from the fear. You can be aware of, things that, outcomes, or, things, possibilities, but knowing that there's solutions for them and what they are, and problem solving. And just, there's a difference from being, scared versus being aware.
And I think in the hospital system, sorry to cut you off.
No, it's perfect.
Is that so they try and make you, they make you think you can labor as long as you want naturally. And then they always sort of, well, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. So it's sort of like they're always in your head. I'm assuming that they just keep bothering you. Oh, well, baby's not progressing, so we have to do this or do this. So there's all these opportunities for them to kind of get in your brain and ruin the flow that you have. And you have to be even more powerful to have a natural birth in a hospital with all those people talking to you and trying to persuade you. And otherwise you're going to kill your baby, as they say. Where if you're at home with a TBA, there's not any of that contradictory talk. They don't play the devil for you. It's just they are there for you to allow this to happen. They are just as a support. They're not going to give you these ultimatums if a deadline isn't hit. So I really encourage anybody to try the TBA route.
I know people always say like it must be so difficult to birth at home. I could never do that. It's like, no, if you birth naturally in the hospital, that's way more difficult than having a baby naturally at home. That's what I always say.
Yes.
Like you endured hijacking and abuse and like coercion and, like you said, the devil on your shoulder
and on your back,
infiltrating and on your back and in your vagina and up all over. So
and so many people. So many people. My first had to be vacuumed. Yes.
Yeah.
So terrible.
See, I never had a hospital birth, so I never really experienced that, but I remember like getting close to like when you hit 41 weeks, they're like, well, we're gonna have to do the non-stress test soon to make sure your placenta is not dying and that the baby is fine. And
Right.
like you get closer and closer to those like milestones they don't want you to hit, and that I found frustrating for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely getting into your head and creating, again, like we've talked about the fear, and then that comes with, fear and judgment. So I'm going to have to think on those two things, because that does seem to be a theme. And I think probably something that comes up with a lot of women in how they experience their pregnancy leading into their birth. I bet, the fear and judgment, I bet, are two huge things that need to be addressed, to figure out how to not care about the judgment, or not, just stand true in your conviction. Because when you're true to yourself, like, it doesn't matter what others think. So I'm going to have to play around with the fear and judgment. I think keeps coming up. There was something else with that I was going to say, but I forgot. Is there anything else, ladies, want to touch on with your experience, or to encourage?
Well, I was going to touch on the fear and judgment.
Oh, thank you.
I think that what happens is, like, we all have our own stories from the way we grew up, or different value systems we hold inside of ourselves. And so fear piece is either like a family member or your own birth story sometimes infiltrating. And then the judgment piece is, we've been so conditioned as women to be so pleasing in many capacities, that we are playing with back and forth the judgment that might happen when we make choices when we become a mother, that maybe would be frowned down upon in your family of origin, your social settings, whatever, your friend settings, whatever that might look like. So it really is a inner dialogue and a discussion you have with yourself. And I feel like it's the first stepping stone and that initiation to motherhood. Because then once you enter motherhood, those are skills that, like, there is fear and judgment that plays out, but then you see this human in front of you and you're like, okay, what do I need to address and access inside myself to be the best for them? What needs to be worked on for me, and what do I see my child needing, So it is an initiation almost to sort of get to the root of the fear and the judgment that is coming up, because it does look so different for everybody.
Like, I know, like, my oldest is 9, and I can tell you now that once you get like almost a decade in, you're like, I don't really give a crap about what anybody thinks anymore. Like, eventually you get so hardened to, like, who cares? If you don't like the way that I'm choosing to do life with my kids, you can just shove it, right? Like, I think in the beginning, I definitely would have tried to please other people, and I definitely for sure did. But now it's like, nope, not going to give that.
And
I
don't even know if it's a harden, it's almost a wisdom, because it's almost like a mama bear, like, protecting your cave. Like, it's like, I know what's down. I know what's right for them. It's just like an inner wisdom.
I think that's so beautifully put with the fear and judgment. Victoria, you said, like, how it is that initiation, how you have to find a way to overcome that, the fear and the judgment, and stand true in how you want to birth your baby, because that will be how you're going to, ultimately end up, like, raising your baby. Are you going to be, in this fear state? Are you going to worry about judgment? And I found that so fascinating with birth. In the hospital, you give up all your powers. And I literally, with my first, I didn't look into anything. I was like, well, I've seen it. I've seen what birth is. I work in the NICU. Like, I go to labor and deliveries, like, it's fine. So looked into nothing, because I was like, oh, when it's time, like, I'm just going to go there and they're going to tell me what to do. Like, what's there to read? and so, like, totally just gave away that power. And it was kind of getting closer, because at that time I was starting to meet people in my life that were questioning childhood immunizations and things like that. And even then, I was like, my best friend now, I was like, oh, I don't think I can be friends with her. Like, 1, she insulted me, and 2, she doesn't want to, like, inject her children. And she's like one of my, like, best friends now. And but I think handing over your power at the hospital, then it's like, okay, you go to the well baby visits. It's like, well, they'll tell me what to do, and you hand over your power again, and that continues. Whereas when you reclaim your birth and you take that power back, and it's you. Like you have to trust you, and you have to trust yourself in your body and this experience, and you have to trust that your baby is okay. So when you go through that process, it's like, holy shit, okay, I did it. Like my body is amazing. My body is capable. I'm capable. I can trust my baby's, amazing, can trust my baby. And I think that moves into the next phase of bringing them up. You don't need someone else to tell you if, they're okay. Are they growing? What they're doing, like, so that's the next phase too. In that confident motherhood, reclaiming motherhood. It's like, no, like I'm the expert over my baby. I'm the expert over my body. I know what's
And
best for them. Yeah.
And don't you think the past 3 years, though, has mothers that really wanted to claim that have stepped into that? Because we've had to protect our children. Like, there's just no way around it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just in itself, mothers that were not wanting to be offended, there's no question now. We're not sitting on a fence. We are protecting our children.
Mm-hmm.
We are living a sovereign, safe place, for our babies and our children. There's just no questioning it anymore. So this needed to happen for us to really reclaim it, I think.
Absolutely.
And know it.
Yeah, I feel it was that final push that kind of stopped the trajectory. Like Kim, that was for you. It's like, nope, I'm not doing this rude. Like I'm not sacrificing any of my beliefs or values. Like, what are my next options? And then that fully you're kind of this way, and it's like, nope, now just totally changing path.
It's a very easy decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you stand firm in those beliefs and values, and this being Children's Health Defense Canada, I think, it's important to talk about, the next phase, those well baby visits are just immunization visits. There is absolutely no need to bring your baby in for them to tell you that your baby is growing and is okay, or to even weigh them. Like, it's just, can you look at them? Are they growing? Are they pooping? Are they peeing? Like, can you see the changes? And then you start to connect more, just like with pregnancy, when you're not going through ultrasounds and you're not going through testing, when you're not doing all that, it's like, wow, you really have to connect to your growing baby and your bump and your body and feel these changes, because no one else is telling you what's going on. And that's the same thing when you don't go to the, these well baby visits. It's like, okay, what is my baby doing? What are the changes? And you connect more and notice more. I find, and it makes a really difference in
Absolutely.
And even with COVID, for women that had midwives, they didn't do in-person visits for a while. The communities out here, they had virtual baby checkups, and they were supposed to get a blood pressure machine and then tell the reading to the midwife, and
bizarre.
Yeah.
So
bizarre.
They just kind of gave themselves away during that whole process. If people are kind of wondering already, they literally solidified it by being like, actually, what we're doing is trying to control you. We actually, they kind of proved it all, but
which is great, because like you said, now we're changing course, changing paths. And Billie Harrigan, who we've been talking about, who we love, who is just incredible. She is sharing her wisdom. So I'm in her second cohort of her traditional birth companion course. She's starting another one up in September. It's a 9-month intensive. If you have experience in the birth world or just ready to get, right into it to do this work. So if you are interested, you can go to billieharrigan.com. I believe it's on there, because I know we need more people to connect and get this wisdom and bring back this, the wise women centered care, and to bring back this knowledge that has been taken from us. So I think that's pretty amazing. So that's starting up in September for anyone that's interested in getting in this line of work. I think we did pretty good, ladies. I
was just going to say, what else is amazing? That we almost made 1 hour.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah. My daughter's playing with an umbrella.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I know. I'm super impressed. Victoria, I know you have a podcast, The Noble Mother, on cue. And then I think you're doing kind of more work. You're going to be discussing more about birth options and birth workers. I think I heard.
Yes. Yeah. I will. I mean, I'm going to. Hello, little one. I'm going to release a podcast more going into depth around the different supports outside the system, because what I did find interesting was to have invested in support like I did outside the system and receive the treatment I did from the radical birth keeper. So that was kind of shocking. And Jen and I talked about that. She's like, how awful. All of us women have been trying to leave the system to get away from the judgment. And, you know, here it was infiltrating through this birth keeper a little bit, you know? So anyways, in the podcast, I'm going to go into that a bit more.
I would love to hear about that. That sounds super interesting.
It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been
it is interesting
and
it infiltrated. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
no,
yes.
absolutely. And I think also follow your podcast. I just love also your what we didn't talk about, and now it's too late. It's funny. Is the postpartum care, and Touchly just I'll touch on that, or if Adley gets too loud, I'll let someone else. But one of the most amazing things I felt was, oh my gosh, like everything is over, the pain, all this, you know, I'm awake now. I want to eat. I'm ready to drink. I feel great, and I'm in my bed. And I'm here, and my kids are here, and you know, my husband's here, and I got up and walked and showered and came back to a clean bed. And my mom took the boys later, and my husband and I got to just hang out with you know, our new daughter and just hang out together. And no one came in to disturb us or check my abdomen or, you know, give me pain meds.
Baby bath.
Yes, in the night. It was just us, and then just the amazing support after. Victoria, looked like you have been, you know, very taken care of with like food, and just, you know, when women really connect and understand, it's like, you know, the meal trains are just the support. And diving over there, I just thought the postpartum afterwards was truly amazing, and not having to walk and leave the hospital and go to your car and, you know, come back. Like, anyways, the postpartum part was like worth it, going through all that just to be at home. Absolutely. So I was like, a couple minutes, made it just to 8, but I was like, we didn't touch on how beautiful that is. And I think you ladies can probably all attest to that as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And nourishment.
Yes.
Yeah. And those 6 days in bed, I will never get again.
No, that's a Billy rule. 6 days in bed.
It.
Which I soaked in. It was like, she came to check on me, and she walked past the bedroom. She's like, where is she? Not in bed, but I have this recliner that is behind me. She's like, okay, that's acceptable. Yeah. So it was nice just to kind of like slow down, because you don't get that back. Well, thank you very much, ladies. I don't know if you have any closing words you'd like to add or anything. But I really appreciate you taking the time with your littles and coming on and having this conversation, and hopefully we will continue these talks. So thank you again.
Kristen.
You're welcome.
Thank you for asking.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you for having
Thanks
us.
for coming. I'm glad this all worked out and we did it.
We did it.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right, ladies, have
Nice
a great
to meet you,
night.
everyone.
I'm
You
just going to
too.
kind of close us off.
Night,
Bye.
Bye. All right.